Good afternoon. How's everyone doing today? Woo! We are going to have the best time, and we are so thankful that you all are here with us. At Trilith, we say our purpose is to set the stage and enrich the lives of the story makers who inspire the world. And when you think about inspiration, it's to breathe life into. And that's our hope today, is that you get a little bit of breath of life into you, into your heart, into your mind, and into your soul. We are so excited because we get to host Dr. Sanjay Gupta and not Dr., but Dan Cathy in a really powerful conversation around what it looks like when we flourish. And our hope for each of us in the room is that we get to grow, that we get to build community, meet somebody that you don't know, that you've never seen before, build community, and we get to learn, really putting on that student mindset to be able to learn today. So here's what's gonna happen. We're gonna have a moderated conversation up here. Then we're gonna have time for you to gather with 2 or 3 other people in conversation with some questions. And then we're gonna come back and have a Q&A. So you might have some questions that are coming to your mind during this time. Write them down, because you're gonna have a chance to submit those and have questions. And then I'm gonna come back up and wrap us all up. So, if you can, one of the biggest, warmest welcomes, please welcome with me to the stage, Tia Miller, Sanjay Gupta, and Dan Cathy.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you see, as we're coming up, you see I'm making the boring entrance, but Sanjay and Dan are making the really cool entrance. Just a little bit about Trilith as they come on the stage. Biking is a huge part of Trilith. It's not only just a passion of our chief visionary officer, Dr. Dan Cathy, but it's also something that we're trying to incorporate here at Trilith. We have a great bike experience. So if you see these bikes up here, you can come and be a part of our bike experience. And that's part of what we're gonna talk about today. Flourishing mentally, physically, by having great brain health. And I can't think of 2 better people to talk about this important topic than our very own Dan Cathy. And of course, I'm biased, but the most trusted name in news doctor with Dr. Sanjay Gupta. So Sanjay and I, when I first graduated college, Sanjay was the first person to believe in me and hired me fresh out of college, and I worked with him for 14 years at CNN. And so, yes, what are the odds? That's nobody but God that I would end up working with Dr. Sanjay Gupta, fresh out of college. And then when I took a mommy gap year and was trying to think about what my next moves would be, I wanted to work at this little business that you may know of called Chick-fil-A. And so I was asking Sanjay, I'm like, aren't you friends with Mr. Dan Cathy? And he said, oh yeah, I know him a little bit. And Sanjay put me in contact with Dan, and Dan put me in contact with Elizabeth, and here I am. So.
I didn't know
our loss by your gain,
yeah,
for sure.
Thank you she's a good training operation.
Exactly.
Well, that's a little bit about me, but I'm so excited to have this conversation with you guys. As you guys just heard, I know both of them personally, Sanjay for 14 years, now Dan for a year, and they are not only some of the biggest mavericks in their own right, but they are the kindest and most caring men that I know. And that says a lot with you both being so powerful in your own right, but you guys show such kindness to so many different people from all walks of life. So I wanted to start off with, I know usually rapid fire questions happen at the end, but because I want people to get to know you a little bit better as we go into this conversation about flourishing through brain, mental, and physical health, I thought we could do the rapid fire at the beginning. Does it sound okay?
Sounds good.
All right, so this is how it's gonna go. 30 seconds is gonna come on the screen. I'm gonna ask you a question. And when I say your name, you have to answer as quickly as possible.
That's why I'm not on game shows. Because we've got a game show. Actually, they're doing 6 shows today.
Wow.
In one of our stages.
Yeah.
And so I never signed myself up for a game show.
Well, you're signed up for one today. It's really easy. All right, are we ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. Sanjay, last movie you watched.
Mountainhead.
Dan, last movie you watched.
I hope I can say this, but it was 2 weeks ago, and my niece Shannon was here, and so I went on a date with my niece, and the name of it was Sinners.
Oh, Sinners.
So I'll stop right there.
Okay.
I'm not saying we sat through the entire movie, but we went to, and we paid $48.12 for an adult ticket, a senior ticket, a Coke, and a medium popcorn.
Okay. I think we're going to have
That's
to
a great
put...
story, but now we know why you're not on game shows.
I know. I think we're going to have to put another 30 seconds and get through the rest. All right, here we go again. We're going to start again. All right, strike one on you, Dan. All right, here we go. Ready, go. Last book you read. Sanjay.
The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien.
Dan, last book you read.
It's one I brought with me called Gun Lap, about an author that's in Nashville, Tennessee.
Awesome. Sanjay, last song you listened to.
Fly Me to the Moon, Frank Sinatra.
Dan, last song you listened
I
to.
heard that as well from an artist also that was covered on CNN that's did a lot of recording and stuff with that. It may have been on Instagram, so I may have been CNN, but it may have been Instagram.
Okay, just 3 more. We're going to get through these really quickly. All right. Sanjay, favorite childhood TV show?
$6 Million Man.
Oh, okay.
I'm old.
Dan, favorite childhood TV show?
Hogan's Heroes.
Favorite sport to watch, Sanjay?
College football.
Is it Michigan?
Michigan, go blue.
Dan, favorite sport to watch?
I love golf.
Oh, okay. And last question, favorite go-to dessert, Sanjay?
This is not a lie. It is a peach milkshake at Chick-fil-A. Those are the best. When are they coming out, by the way?
That's seasonal. It should be out next week or so.
Okay, I'll be first in line.
Yeah.
Dan,
So,
favorite go-to dessert?
golly, I love cheesecake, so I'll leave it with cheesecake. Maybe put some Chick-fil-A ice cream on top of the cheesecake.
I was going to say the Chick-fil-A plug. All right, give them a hand. They did great. You got the hang of it at the end, Dan, so I think we could sign you up for a game show. All right, we're going to dive right into it. Okay, so Sanjay, I call him Sanjay. Of course, you guys know him as Dr. Gupta. In your book, Keep Sharp, you talked about the importance of daily habits and protecting brain health. Can you share one practice that anyone can start today to improve brain sharpness?
Sure. Can I just say, first of all, that I'm really honored to be here. I really, this means a lot to me. I've been looking forward to this. There's a lot of things that are happening in the world. We all pay attention to those things, but then we get to come together for moments like this of lightness and camaraderie and learning. And so it means a lot to me. And flourishing is such a great term. It means so many things, and I'm just so honored that you think of me for this. So thank you. I spent a lot of time working on this book, Keep Sharp, and part of it is because I'm a neurosurgeon. I'm very interested in the brain. But you'll appreciate this, Tia. But I wrote the whole book. I finished writing it. I called my mom. I said, I'm finally done. I wrote the book. And she told me, look, to be totally honest, I'm probably not going to get around to reading it. So could you sort of summarize it for me? Moms, But the thing that I told her, and this we can get into the why of this, but one of the best things you can do for your brain health on a regular basis is to take a brisk walk with a close friend and talk about your problems. A brisk walk with a close friend and talk about your problems. Brisk walking, brisk movement is probably the best thing you can overall do for brain health. But this idea of connection and being able to be vulnerable around people. When you talk about your problems, it allows you to be vulnerable around people. And people always say it's not the number of connections you have, it's the quality of those connections. People that you can be vulnerable around, those are quality connections. So brisk walk, close friend, talk about your problems.
Amazing. And
Let's go for a walk.
Yeah, I'd love it. Dan, anytime, Dan. Or a bike ride.
Believe it or not, at CNN, we used to do walking meetings, and Sanjay had a walking desk towards the end, so he was being innovative with incorporating physical fitness into your daily work routine before it became popular. Yeah. And then I came here, and go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was going to comment about the way that walking and exercise energizes. Years ago, I had a friend at Delta Airlines, and I would often call him with some crazy ideas. This was right when we were transitioning out of big mainframe computers to servers, and then, of course, down to laptops and so forth. And I would call him so frequently after running with just some ideas that I would never had unless I'd been really energized by the exercise. And I'd call him and he said, "Don't tell me you've been running again." I said, "Yes, I have." So he knew he was in for another 15 minutes of crazy ideas I was about to share with him.
And that's why you two are both aging backwards. I saw, I was with Dan on a trip the other day, and he was showing me some pictures, and I was like, you're getting younger. Like, the more, the older you get, that's so crazy, and that's the same with Sanjay, and I think it's because you guys take physical, mental, and brain health so seriously. And that leads me into you, Dan. You are literally the epitome of Sanjay's book in keeping sharp. And we're gonna put some pictures on the screen, and we think some of the reasons why that you keep sharp, because you have such great routines from family to work to creativity. So walk us through some of the pictures on the screen and how you incorporate sharpness in your life.
Yeah, well, I'm delighted to have my bride of almost 52 years, Rhonda, that's here, and I have no idea where she's at. Please, Rhonda, recognize her. So I just received this picture on the top left. It's one of my favorites. I hope I can reenact this photograph maybe one of these days. But that's Rhonda and I smooching in the kitchen. And young team member Walter Owen, who's been with us for over 40 years, who's still a Chick-fil-A operator now. But anyway, so we're thankful. I got other members of my family. My son Ross is here, and his wife Jamie, they're in the picture, and their two sons. There's three bald-headed guys right there. That's Samuel Truett Cathy, and Dan Truett Cathy, and Andrew Truett Cathy, all with the same name that was named after a well-known minister, pastor, First Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas, that my grandmother listened to over the radio. Fun with the cows, doing Cow Appreciation Day. My dad just loved to have fun, self-effacing humor, face paint, all kind of stuff that he had going on. I love what John Maxwell says about success. Success is about succession. And when I handed this baton off to my son Andrew some 3.5 years ago, I also gave him a Bible that's there in his hand. And that Bible was my mother's Bible. And it had a lot of notes and verses underlined and things that were going on in her life. And I told Andrew, I said, this baton as CEO of Chick-fil-A will be a whole lot lighter if you'll keep a Bible in the other hand. To help you realize that your strength does not come from your work hours, muscling it up, but your strength comes from the wisdom that God will give you if you'll ask of it. Peachtree Road Race, I'm not sure what year that is, but I've done, 25 Peachtree Road Races. Music also, I'm seeing on Instagram that a lot of people are acknowledging music from a mental standpoint, puts some things together, combinations together. You can tell us what else going on with the brain here, but I've played the trumpet virtually all my life. Andrew Young was a trumpet player. He called me one day and said, "I got a trumpet I want to give to you." I said, "Really?" He said, "It's a piccolo trumpet." I said, "A piccolo trumpet? That's a specialty trumpet you use for Baroque music and weddings and so forth." Only to get to his office to realize it was actually a pocket trumpet, which is not nearly as exciting as a piccolo trumpet, but I didn't want to tell him that. I was delighted when he presented it to me. And there's all kinds of things we need to have fun. So I'm there with a Caterpillar track hoe with a Canadian mulch head on front of it. And I'm out here, clearing these woods all around this place, getting ready for the U.S. Soccer Federation, clearing paths for new bike mountain trails that we've got in the pipeline here. So I just love keeping myself busy, a lot of variety in my life on a regular basis.
Awesome. So those things help keep your brain sharp by doing those amazing things.
Can I say something about the music real quick? Because this is really important. Would you mind holding the microphone for me, too? I want to show this brain. So, it's really interesting, Dan, when you talk about music and the brain, because there's very few things that we experience. Let's stand up. You want to stand up? Very few things that we experience that can actually activate all these different parts of the brain. And you hear about people who even have dementia, who can still remember songs from their childhood. They listen to music and immediately transports them back. So let me just show you. When you're thinking about lyrics and things like that, just starting to think about it activates this part of the brain. When you start to actually say the lyrics, even before you might start to sing the lyrics, it is over here, this part of the brain. So right away, you got two very different parts of the brain activated. You start to put a beat to it, and it activates over here, and then rhythm really comes from your cerebellum. There's hardly anything that we do in our lives that actually activates that many different parts of the brain crossing over from one side to the other. So, music is something that I've always enjoyed, but as I've gotten older, I've started to incorporate it into my life in a more meaningful way, trying to play instruments, trying to do some singing, not very well. But just those things, I think incorporating music, as you say, into your life does so much for your brain, and there's a reason why people remember songs even as they get older.
They did a special on Tony Bennett. I think it was a CNN 60 Minutes, so talk about that.
Yeah, so they did one on Tony Bennett. As he was starting to lose some of his memories, they did another one on Glenn Campbell. I don't know if you remember this, but Glenn Campbell had significant dementia, and yet he would get up on stage and be able to play these songs flawlessly. And I think there's real lessons in there. Why is music so retained? And I think it's because it is activating all these different parts of your brain. We saw it with famous people like Tony and Glenn.
I was amazed. Lady Gaga was at a grand piano in the little concert. Well, I think it was recognized as his final concert. And it was a little dicey how Tony was actually going to respond on stage in a very public setting. A lot of risk that was there of embarrassment for him. But when she started playing that piano, the music started flowing, and it all came back. And
It is amazing how we learn things about the most enigmatic 3.5 pounds of tissue in the universe, our brains, through simple things like music.
So is it too late now for everyone to start getting music lessons and piano?
No, absolutely not. And I think Tia's going to ask about this, but this is one of the most amazing things that I think we've learned just even over the last 10 years. I think we've long believed that the brain was sort of fixed. You got what you got. Around age 25 or so, your brain stopped developing. We thought that was it. You'd slowly drain the cache of neurons over your life. But now we know that's not the case. You can grow new brain cells at any age. And you look at some of these places around the world, Dan. You visited some of these places. I was with a 93-year-old who was still doing 5-digit math in his head. I mean, just remarkable stories. And oftentimes you think, are those the exceptions to the rule? And now you realize they're the rules. They are the rules in many parts of the world. So hopefully we can talk about that as well.
We definitely will. Thank you. I love when you pull out Harold. That's what we call him at CNN. Just diving right into that, just how physical health helps your brain health. We talked about music, and we have a cool graphic that CNN sent over for us to show about the graphic and how it works with your brain. But here, you could go ahead and talk about it now, actually.
The thing that has probably the most evidence behind this concept of neurogenesis, you're looking at new neurons being developed, new connections, new pathways being created. The thing that has the most evidence behind it is actually movement. More than crossword puzzles, more than word puzzles, simple movement. And I think what's so extraordinary about this is that it's really, as I was saying earlier, brisk movement more than intense movement. Intense movement, I think, has a lot of virtues, very good for your cardiovascular health. But when you are intensely moving, intensely exercising, you're also creating a lot of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And cortisol can inhibit some of that neurogenesis that you were seeing there on the screen. So there's a role for intense exercise, but if it's your brain health you're trying to really develop, brisk movement makes a much bigger difference. And there's lots of evidence behind it. So in communities around the world where they don't even have gyms, they don't go to a gym, but they do walk everywhere or bike everywhere, it's just part of their normal routine, they are constantly creating those new pathways. And again, as I was saying, I think what we've learned, and I think has been really revelatory in the world of neuroscience, is that we can lose those pathways very quickly, and we can gain those pathways very quickly. And to just put a punctuation mark on it, when I say quickly, I mean within 20 weeks. There was these studies that recently came out in people who had the diagnosis of Alzheimer's dementia. So they were told, you have Alzheimer's dementia. And a decade ago, that would have been something where you're just staring over the abyss. There's nothing to sort of rescue from that. And now we know through some basic lifestyle changes, 20 weeks, you can actually create new brain cells. And I saw myself people whose symptoms were stalled or reversed as a result of those things. No new medications, no new therapies, just these lifestyle changes.
You mentioned international. Comment on what's been referred to as blue zones.
Yeah.
So what's that idea about?
So blue zones they're really interesting. There are these places where these researchers found people were living extraordinarily long lives. And they were living not just long lives, but they were living lives full of health span, as they're called. So it was really functional lives as well. And there were several of them around the world. Sardinia, Italy was one of them. The Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, here in the United States, Loma Linda, California. So there's all these places around the world. Okinawa rather, Japan. So these researchers then went to these places and said, why do we have so many people who are living at least to 100 years old, centenarians, and trying to figure out what those places had in common. And many of them were the things that you'd expect. They ate a lot of whole foods. They weren't necessarily all vegan or vegetarian, but they did eat fresh foods pretty regularly. With regard to movement, as I was saying, they often were using just natural walking or biking, non-motorized vehicles to get from point A to point B as part of their daily life. Many of these places had some altitude to the walking, so you did have to walk up hills and walk down hills as part of that. Social connection. I mean, these are all things that I think intuitively made sense. You kind of say, yeah, it sounds right, being closely connected, being active, eating a good diet. But then to see the impact of that you'd have more people who live to 100 in a very healthy way than other places around the world became the subject of all these books and documentaries and now studies.
Yeah. And as we plan and think about Trilith and the very purpose that Elizabeth shared with us earlier, we're actually building and designing a town and a community here that would be listed in those blue zones. In fact, we have Harvard and Baylor as already been mentioned, or we'll get into it later, whenever. But anyway, they're studying this community. It's a longitudinal study where we've established some baselines with conversations with individuals, and we're going to be tracking that over time. So we're trying to build a community here that is going to enrich the lives of story makers who, in turn, are going to inspire the world because of the quality. We're making a big bet here that if you live a better life, you'll tell a better story. And so we want to elevate the quality of the life, relationships that people have. And certainly, we don't have a lot of competition out of LA because you don't have to do much to beat out lifestyles in LA. So, we don't have traffic here per se, but we've got clean air, we've got wholesome relationships, we've got great schools, and all this infrastructure that's so important for our county, for any community. But we are so fortunate. Let me tell you, not a day goes by that we're not working with our elected officials at the city and the county level. And let me tell you, they get it. They get exactly what you're talking about. They're willing to invest public funds to help us build the kind of infrastructure that we need going forward in the future. And it's going to be how we stay relevant as a community. We actually saw the demographic number going down for the first time this past year. So for the first time in years, we actually got a little younger in the last 12 months. And I think a lot of it had to do with what's going on here at Trilith.
Exactly, and we could jump right to it about flourishing communities, what we're doing here at Trilith. A few weeks ago, we hosted a Flourishing Summit where we had the professors that are leading out this study about flourishing from Harvard and Baylor, and we brought some of the most great minds that are trying to create these flourishing communities, and they're using Trilith as a case study on how communities can flourish just like here at Trilith. And one of the ways that people are flourishing, kind of like where you're talking about in the blue zone, we have a resident here. He couldn't be here today, but we have a picture of a 95-year-old resident, Mr. Quentin King.
Yes,
I think we
Quentin
have this
here.
picture. No, but we have this picture. This is his workout group right here.
Wow.
He works out.
Yeah. So on Sunday, he sits right
He's
back in this
95?
section right here. So he's got 4 generations of family members that live right around him. So that's another part of flourishing, Sanjay, is it not? Is multi-generational
Yes.
families staying together?
Yeah, and you were just in India, and you saw that probably, these multi-generational families. I grew up like that, which was interesting because you got grandparents and parents and grandkids all living in the same household, taking care of each other, learning from each other. we got away from that in many parts of the world. It's interesting. I remember having this conversation with some of my cousins, and they were saying about this company that was coming to Delhi to try and build these nursing homes in New Delhi, and they basically told them that's never going to work here. Why? Because people live with their families. Yeah. Families want to take care of the elderly. They don't want to put them in nursing homes as they get older, which I thought was so fascinating and part of the reason I think they live so long. By the way, God, 95 years old?
Hey, Ross
he looks like
here,
he could take some
Ross,
of those guys.
watch out. I may be moving over. Save a bedroom for your dad and your mother, if you would, please.
You'll all live longer as a result.
But no, that's something that we're so proud about here at Trilith. We're creating this atmosphere where this is actually a picture in the gym that's in the community where he goes with his workout group. And just talking about physical fitness and here at Trilith and how we're creating these flourishing communities. Why is biking so important, and why did you feel the need to bring it here to Trilith and make sure that it's something that we can try to incorporate here?
Yeah. So I've not been a biker. I've been a walker, runner, mainly running all my life, but I kind of had
and not to cut you off, he just hit 1,000 miles on his bike the other week. Isn't that amazing?
So, yeah, in 6 months.
6 months.
So I commute, so nobody here is without excuse. So I start my commute, as I did this morning, out of Woolsey, Georgia, on Highway 92. I drive north, I cross over Georgia at 85, and I get over onto Highway 54, and I come west on 54 to Ginger Cake. That's how I arrived here. Now, why would I take, there are back roads that I could do, but I'm telling you, the bigger roads have bigger shoulders and actually feel safer. But it is a learned skill. You may know this, Tia, that actually people say, well, aren't you concerned about safety? I say, hey, there's a whole lot more people get killed in cars than there are on bicycles. I don't know if you knew that, but that statistic is very accurate. There's more people killed in a car with car accidents than there are bicycles. I'll let you think about that for a minute. But so here's the thing. If we know right here in Atlanta, the Beltline as an example, and the Beltline phenomenon is a 22-mile loop around Atlanta. It's about 70% maybe completed at this point. Totally transformational from a safety standpoint, from an economic development standpoint, and these infrastructure projects like that and other parks that are being done, like the Clyde Warren Park in Dallas, Texas, the Centennial Park in Chicago, the High Line in New York, are transformational. And it is the magnet for younger people to want to be in areas where they can push a baby stroller, or they can jog, or they can see people, and they can feel safe. And it kind of homogenizes what otherwise would be in typical suburbans, very polarized segments. And that's traditionally how even Fayette County, was subdivided by all these different price points on homes. But what we've done here, but amazing, at Trilith, we've got $2 million homes right next to $300,000 homes. We've got a $300,000 600 square foot house right next to, $1.5 million or 2 million, 2,000 square foot home. That we got boomers. And we got people like Mr. Queen sitting, right next to young couples, first-time homeowners, all together. You'd think, well, is that really good for home values? Well, take a look. If you did a map of the economic development and tax income that we're paying back to the city and the county, you would see Fayetteville over here, you'd see Peachtree City over here, and you'd see Trilith way up here. So it's becoming very, very desirable to live in these kind of communities. There's a sense of safety here. We talk about free-range chicken, but here they talk about free-range children that are running around all over the place because they know there's a lot of aunts and uncles, surrogate aunts and uncles that are looking after things. Kind of like Opie, or the Little Rascals, where everybody's just kind of looking after one another. So anyway.
I guess so.
You're too young to know the Little Rascals, Tia.
I actually know about the Little Rascals. But physical health is really what helps with brain health, Sanjay. And I know that, like I talked about earlier, that's so important to you. A fun fact about Sanjay, I don't know if you'll kill me for saying this, but he wanted to get into triathlons. And we have a couple of pictures of you with your tri. But he ended up teaching himself how to swim. Only a neurosurgeon would do that. in order to train and get into a triathlon. And so can you talk about what was the importance of you wanting to do triathlons and how that ties into your brain health?
Well, I think I started thinking about this when I turned 40. And, I lived my life. I think when you're training to be a neurosurgeon, you're buckled down for a long time. I spent my 20s and early part of my 30s basically just grinding away in the hospital and hitting the books. And, it's interesting. Sometimes medicine, a field which I think is responsible for caring for other people, sometimes does not allow a mechanism for people to care for themselves that well. I know, sadly, a lot of doctors and nurses and providers who are not that healthy, sadly. And so I thought that doesn't make sense to me, and I wanted to be proactive about this. And given that I was doing television, I wanted to also be a good model for other people around this, other healthcare providers, but frankly, just anybody, especially as you get into your 40s and 50s. So that's really what originally got me into it. And you're right, I didn't know how to swim. I knew how to not drown, but that was basically it. And I went on YouTube, and I just watched these videos of how to swim. And do you know how to swim, Dan?
I did a mini triathlon, and I went into Lake Lanier, and I almost drowned because a bunch of piranhas going in at the same time, and that killed me.
Well, I don't know what I could do about that. Yeah. But the swimming, you'll actually watch these videos, and then I set up my phone at the other end of the pool, and it would video you, and then it would correct you in terms of telling you how to improve your stroke. So it's amazing what you can learn from YouTube nowadays. Learn how to play instruments, learn how to swim. I mean, it's totally democratized education, just about anything. But anyways, I really wanted to do that. And the other thing that I sort of learned, Tia, again, was that intense activity has real value. I think I worry about cardiovascular health. I have a family history of heart disease. My dad. I have a family history of dementia as well, my mom's father. So I was thinking about all these things, and I thought I want to continue doing intensive exercise for the cardiovascular health, but also simply the idea of not sitting. Just not sitting. And I say that, of course, as we're all sitting, but still, it's almost like sitting sends a signal to your body that you're done. If you travel around these communities that Dan was asking about, these blue zones, in many places, you just don't see people sitting. The only people who are sitting are very elderly people. Other than that, people are either lying when they're sleeping or they're standing. And I think when you sit a lot, it's almost like you're telling your body, turn off the peripheral defense system. My time here is done. And just by standing and moving around a little bit, you're activating your immune function. You're improving your cardiovascular health. I think one of the biggest advantages of walking is that you can't be sitting while you're walking. Sitting is probably the enemy. Some people say sitting is the new smoking. I think that's probably a little bit hyperbolic, but I get the message. So that was another thing. Just move. Just keep moving. And I think that's why I really wanted to do it and set an example, because it was scary for me to get out there and do triathlons on television, and everyone's judging you, and you put up these ridiculous pictures of me, Tia. So all of that. I got a pink, I don't know where that hat came from, or those goggles for that matter. But just get up and move.
Sanjay, are you excited about anything from artificial intelligence? Because that's such the buzz right now. But do you see expect any profound insights that we'll gain from this new tool?
I am very bullish on artificial intelligence. I know that it's a scary concept to some people, this idea of these large language models starting to predict human behavior and even making decisions on behalf of humans. I understand the concerns there, but I think this is a technology that is clearly here to stay. And I think it's already, frankly, changing healthcare. There was a study that came out that looked at the mammography, so for breast cancer. And they found that these AI platforms were better than radiologists at finding breast cancers. If you've interacted with the healthcare system at all within the last year, if you've gone to a clinic visit, if you've gone to the hospital, there's probably a very good chance that artificial intelligence was involved with your care somehow. It may have read your scans, it may have sent you a letter. One of the big questions we often get as neurosurgeons is someone comes in, for example, with a herniated disc in their back, and they got back pain and they got leg pain, and the question is, do you operate or not operate? We can now look at billions and billions of pieces of data, and the AI platform can say, here's 50,000 people that are just like Dan Cathy in terms of their back pain and their leg pain. Here's the people who got operated, here's the people who didn't, here's their outcomes, and here is the best approach forward for Dan Cathy or whoever the patient may be. So we've been talking about big data for a long time. We have so much data. There's these huge data sets that are collected in hospitals, big hospitals like Emory, smaller hospitals. They all feed into this Epic data system. You can now query that data system within seconds. So studies that would have taken 10 years can now come back to you within minutes. So I'm very bullish. I think it needs guardrails. I think we have to be careful. Sometimes the AI will, quote unquote, hallucinate, and it will make these wild errors as a result. So I think we have to have a trust but verify model when it comes to AI. But I think it's here to stay. I think it's going to be totally transformative for the next generation of healthcare.
So you mentioned data. I'm sitting in my dental hygienist this morning, had a 8 o'clock appointment this morning, and I was asking, do you have my latest physical, which I had just 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I feel like that the dentist needs to know what's going on with me and ought to have all the latest information. But they don't have it, so disparate. You know, cardiology over here, dermatology over here, primary physician over here. I'm just really frustrated that our data system in the medical field is not more consolidated.
The frustration is totally founded. I think where we are headed is that data will live with you. You will be the source of your data. Right? It's kind of crazy, that if you think about it, that so much of our most intimate data, the data that really is the story of us, our healthcare, our well-being, all of that, is oftentimes stored somewhere remotely. Ultimately, I think probably what your data will look like, and when I say soon, I mean within the next couple of years, it will look like an avatar on your phone. So it won't be a bunch of written words. It'll probably be images, and you could click on your mouth, you could click on your knee, and it would tell you everything about Dan Cathy. If you wanted to show it to your hygienist, if you wanted to show it to your doctor, whoever, you show it to Rhonda, they could find the story of you. You go to a doctor's visit, and let's say they're thinking about operating on your knee. You could actually click on your knee, and there would be a patient visit where you're actually sitting right there next to your knee with your doctor, and your doctor's telling you on your phone what's going on.
So biometrics, you got this ring on. Is that a biometric device?
Yes. I'm a big quantified self person. I like to, I don't know, I just like data, and I like sort of being reminded that I'm doing a good job,
We see eye to eye on a lot of things.
Yeah. But no, I mean, sleep is a big one for me as well. Like, I'd like to measure my sleep. And I'll tell you, I used to drink a glass of wine every now and then. I've stopped drinking almost entirely because I just didn't get good sleep. I could measure that my sleep, even with a half a glass of wine, was going to be worse than if I didn't have wine. So
Jim Collins on stage with us at Chick-fil-A, he made this statement, this back in the Palm Pilot days, so that tells you how old this illustration is.
Good to great,
but
Jim Collins.
He said, good to great, one of the great, really, really most respected business thought leaders in the last several decades. But he said, there's a good quote, he said, the more sleep I get, the better questions I ask. Isn't that good?
I love that. You get to think more deeply.
Yes, and boy, leadership is really about asking the right questions.
Right. You need to ask the right questions. You need to know the question. Asking the right questions is wisdom. Knowing the right answers is being smart, but asking the right questions is wisdom, I think.
Yeah. So let me just make a comment about wisdom, and we'll get back to your questions. We're having a nice conversation.
I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it.
So when I came here, I wanted to have times in which I could quote scripture. And I just want to share that as we think about life and life flourishing and being at our very best, staying sharp, the Bible quickly reminds us that we're going to run into a lot of frustrations in life that we'll never be able to figure out on our own. And it reminds us that if we'll just acknowledge the Lord in all the ways, He'll direct our paths. So I just want to register that thought in here. But also say that James 1:5 says that any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. And I'm needing at this time in my life like never before, I shouldn't say like never before, but as many, many times before. I need a lot of wisdom right now. And I'm realizing that I'm not going to figure my way, through it. But it's going to have to be a gift. He's going to have to make things happen. But he's made things happen here. I often ask, was this a big dream? And I said, no, it was just one open door at a time. So as we think about this topic, we all would want wisdom to make good decisions. And just as a little advertisement here that God wants to be our refuge.
Dan, can I ask you, because you have had such a blessed life, as you have described. How do you incorporate gratitude into your life on a regular basis? I mean, do you sit back and actually revel in the life that you've led?
Well, somebody asked me last night. We had a meeting last night with about 60 summer interns that were Trilith interns, Chick-fil-A interns, and U.S. Soccer Federation interns. And one of the young ladies asked me a question, said, are you proud of this or proud of that? And I understood her question, but I also said, I found that anytime I can use the word pride, I could substitute the word thankful. So are you thankful for this? Or are you thankful for that? So it's very habitual and subliminal and consciously as well, in which I can immediately say I'm very thankful, because you look back and see all the things that we've been blessed with. We know it's not by how hard we've worked or our intellect, but it's by God's hand we're fed. And that's a genuine and honest sense of immense gratitude for the opportunities that God has put our way. Struggles, to be sure, but yet even there, a sense of gratitude that God will never leave us, by ourselves. He will always be at our rescue. And as we think about mental health, physical health, relational health, emotional health, and so forth, there is a thing called spiritual health. And one of the travels that I've had, I was just sharing with Chandra, I was in India, and I went to 5 different Hindu temples while I was over there. And I was able to go in those temples. Some of them had to take my shoes off, some I had to take my shoes and socks off. Always respectful of the people, but I felt comfortable being there because I wanted to observe and learn, and to see songs being sung, prayers being made, meditation taking place. I was in a Buddhist temple even just 3 weeks ago in Thailand, where you see some of the same thing going on. So the spiritual thing is a thing, and it, for all of humanity, has been recognized. Now, we have different doctrinal relationships, of course, that we believe in and so forth, but still nurturing the spiritual development is as important as all these other things that we mentioned as well.
And speaking of just spiritual development, one of the things that Sanjay taught me, he would do these 3-day fasts. And he was talking about how fasting actually helps create new stem cells, which helps with the brain. And I know that was very important to you, and you incorporated that a lot into your lifestyle and how that helped you with your brain health. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because fasting is, of course, a big spirituality thing, but it's something that you incorporate regularly in your life.
By the way, thank you. It's nice to know that you were actually listening when I was talking. I didn't think you were listening, but you were. I am fascinated by the concept of fasting. Part of it is I grew up in a Hindu household, and that was part of our culture. But I think what I learned, and I found this really fascinating, is that if you think about your body, and you think just about the population of cells in your body, you have good cells, you have bad cells, you have really high-performing cells, you have poorly performing cells, older cells, younger cells. And in places like the United States, where we have plenty of food, plenty of resources, we essentially treat all those cells in a very democratic way. We feed the good cells, bad cells, everything. When you fast, what tends to happen is that you're creating sort of a purge of those cells that haven't been serving you well. The poorly performing cells do not survive the fast. The inefficient cells do not survive the fast. So even if you think about age, for example, some people will say age is really a percentage of young cells in your body. We think of age as revolutions of planets, but from a biological perspective, how young are the cells in your body? One way to create a higher percentage of young cells in your body is to fast, because essentially you purge the poorly performing older cells. And then, as Tia mentioned, usually around day 2, maybe 40, 48 hours or so of the fast, you suddenly get this stem cell surge to replace all the cells that have been gone. And people who fast, I don't know if anybody fasts in here, but they will often say, you feel hungry, obviously, but around day 2, all of a sudden you get this burst of energy. You're like, I have not been eating very much, if anything, and all of a sudden I feel highly energized. And that is the stem cell surge. There's a guy named Robert Longoni who's out of Southern California, USC. He's written a lot about this. He wrote a book, and subsequently the National Cancer Institute started adopting his fasting protocol for cancer patients, because cancer patients oftentimes, because of chemotherapy and things like that, they need a burst of stem cells to replace the cells that have been lost due to the treatments. So it's really fascinating. And I do it, as Tia mentioned, every quarter now. I'll do a significant fast. I feel fantastic. I'm not doing it for weight loss or anything like that, although you do lose weight. You feel great. And I think in some ways I'm making myself biologically younger.
And when you fast, set aside what you drink, juices or just water, or?
So just water. It's a water-only fast, but I will do about somewhere between 300 and 500 calories, mainly these broths. They're basically just very low-calorie broths, something that has a little bit of nutrients in it. But there are people who just basically will do water-only fast as well. There is something that's called the fasting mimicking diet, FMD, which you can look up, but it basically teaches you like how to sort of get right around 300 to 500 calories a day, where you're not feeling like you're overwhelmingly hungry. You got to sort of, even though it's very few calories, you sort of spread it out throughout the day. You got to make sure you're hydrated. And I'll tell you, my experience, and I think it's been the experience of a lot of people, is at the end of day 2, roughly, you suddenly feel great. Really, really good. And that sustains me for a long time, for months afterward.
So once a quarter.
Once a quarter.
So we will have our last question before we break out into our learning groups, but I thought we could end here. A funny story, when I first started my first week here, I was walking outside with Daniel Bastia, who's here, and as I was walking, Dan says, y'all want to take a tour of the new Live building? And so I'm thinking like, oh, this should be easy. But Dan was walking so fast, like he was taking laps around Live, and I was doing my best because it's my first real interaction with him, and he's like walking up the steps really fast, and I'm literally trying to catch my breath, like trying to make sure I don't have a heart attack, and he's just running and like just doing laps. And so I say that to say to end here, I know an important thing that you always talk about is the last lap that you like to and talk about quite often. So I thought it was something that we could end here before we break into our small groups.
Yeah, I thought I might mention just a couple of books that have meant a lot to me on this overall subject of wellness. So forgive me, I'm not receiving any type of commission from Amazon or anybody else, but this is one book that's meant a lot to me. It's called Gun Lap. So if you're running a race around an oval track, typically they'll fire a gun to indicate you're entering in your last lap. So for those of us that are north of 50, 60, or north of even 70 years here, let's make our gun lap our best lap. Let's sprint to the finish line. And so this is an author that I want to bring here, Robert Walderman. He's from North Nashville, Tennessee. Just a couple of quick books. Also, I highly recommend. You know Arthur Brooks, by any chance?
Oh, of course, yeah.
He's the professor of happiness now at Harvard. So I've gotten to know him. He's a musician as well. And so you're familiar with this book, From Strength to Strength. So I highly recommend. These are, if I have a bookshelf of maybe about 20 or 30 books that over the season of my life were real difference makers for me, that helped me think differently. And I highly recommend this book, Arthur Brooks, Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Your Life. And then I have a dear friend that's right off from my stage left over here, but Steve Franklin. Steve, stand up if you would, please. Stand up where we can see where you're at. They want to meet my friend Steve Franklin. So celebrating 100 years. So Steve, Dr. Steve Franklin, did interviews with 100 centenarians and reaping their wisdom about life, things they wish they had done more of, left, and so forth. So Steve, great job on this book. And I'm sure Steve would want you to have a copy of this, so I'll let you have it. And for a small fee, he'll be happy to autograph it right over there for you, Steve Franklin. So those are
I can't wait to read it. Thank you.
Those are my little quickies.
No, I love it. And as you know, Sanjay's book, Keep Sharp, that we saw at the beginning, but he also has a great book coming out this September about pain. So that's be another book you should add to your list. But now we're going to break into our gathering circles. And so this is something that we do at our enrichment series that we like. We know people who form lifelong relationships from this. But basically, we want to take about 7 to 8 minutes where you turn to 2 or 3 people in your area, introduce yourself, get to know them, and we're going to put a few questions on the screen that you could talk about, that you could share your answers with each other, and then also talk about what we learned here today. And then after that, we are going to do a fun Q&A, and what we want you to do is to send us some questions for Dan and Sanjay. You could follow us on Trilla at Instagram at Trilla Foundation, and DM us some questions after this learning circle, and then we will ask the questions that you DM us to Dan and Sanjay. So put your name, because Dan, would love to see who you are. We'll call you and have you stand up, put your name, send a question that you learned in your group, and then we'll get to as many questions as we can after our learning circle. So we're gonna go ahead. Let's give them a hand, first of all, for they were great. And we are going to bring them back up in about 7 to 8 minutes, but we want you guys to now turn to your neighbors and get to know them and come up with some questions and DM us again. That's Trilla Foundation at Instagram if you want to send us the direct questions. So now we will get into some questions, okay? Now we have books that Dan recommended, but somebody wanted to know, what books do you recommend, Sanjay?
Well, I really did like this book that I recently read, The Things They Carried. This was a book by Timothy O'Brien. It's a book, frankly, about the Vietnam War, but I think it's a lot more about how people deal with adversity in their lives. And I think oftentimes it's only when you're challenged do you sort of realize how high you can sort of fly and what you can accomplish. So I really very much enjoyed that book. I read a lot of health books. I've read a book recently called Protocols, which is coming out pretty quickly, all about like health practices you can incorporate into your life, things that are pretty simple. I've read a lot of books about pain recently, as I've been working on my own book about pain. Pain is the fastest growing disease class in the United States. 20% of people in this country deal with chronic pain, and it's growing at a pace that's faster than diabetes or heart disease, so I've been reading a lot about that. But I'm a health guy, so that is sort of where I focus my attention.
I want to thank you for going in crisis situations. We see you dealing with Ebola. We see you dealing with all kind of places around the world. Thank you for your coverage to help us understand the reality of pain and suffering that people are dealing with.
Thank you, Dan. That means a lot. Appreciate it.
I could tell lots of stories of Sanjay in these war zones, earthquake zones, but it's just part of who he is in his heart. And he's spent a lot of time in helping people there doing surgeries in Haiti and different places. So just a great, great heart. Dan, somebody said that you mentioned storytelling and healthy people tell great stories. How are you helping to secure the film industry here at Trilla so they can continue to tell better stories?
So stories are how we live life. We have stories of memories that we have. We have, whether it be fictional stories that we tell ourselves or nonfiction stories of the realities that we live. But the craft of storytelling is a true craft to be learned over time. If you're a marketer in business, it's all about stories, whether it's eat more chicken, with these cows that don't know how to spell very well. But we know that stories in any area of life are very important. It's very important that we capture stories. We talk about multi-generational families and these stories that we're able to pay it forward by sparing someone else the pain and misery of maybe mistakes, lapses of judgments that we may have had. So we capture these stories. So, Trilla at all the stages and the remarkably talented people. We have some of the greatest storytellers of our generation who are working right here in this area. And you may see them at Woodstone Bakery, you may see them at Enzo, you may see them at Honeysuckle Gelato. We got some remarkable people that are running around here, and they're working on a lot of sneaky peeky stuff that you're not going to see until 6 months on down the road. And you go, wow, where was that shot? Well, it was shot right here in Fayette County, in the city of Fayetteville, in the little town of Trilith. And we have the opportunity of, supporting that kind of thing and encouraging these people and have the kind of place that they just want to be. So it's a pretty cool hangout spot.
And the Trilla Foundation was not Dan's brainchild, and he wants to service those who are here on the lot in production. We know that those, a lot of production that work in production, they work sometimes 12 to 18-hour days. And so through his generosity in helping with the Trilla Foundation, we're able to create programs and resources and all events like this in order to help those who are in production to bring down the mental health crisis that's running rapid through the production industry.
We had just this weekend, we had a senior person that has done a lot of work here that tragically took his life. And, we never know. Every life has a story. We never know what's going on and what people are dealing with here. We can assume that everybody's got issues and challenges that are going on. And I commented this morning to Sanjay when I first saw him that I had captured an encouraging word that he'd sent me 2 years ago. And I cut and pasted that little encouraging text message into his contact record. And I was going back through that this morning, and I saw it, and I copied it back to him. I said, I want you to know how much I appreciate the very kind comment you made. So as it relates to mental health, we don't all have to be neurosurgeons to help people, to give them some encouragement. It's on a word. It could be a look. Just looking. I was listening to you at Times Daily, where if you can look in someone's eyes for 4 minutes, it's guaranteed you'll fall in love with them. And so I asked Rhonda the other day if I could just have 30 seconds, but so I'm working on 4 minutes, but it's very powerful.
I got to say, so this message, because Dan, you reminded me, Dan sent, we were texting early this morning, and I had sent him a message, February of 2023. Amanda Seeley, who's one of my producers, is here. We were in Turkey covering the earthquake. And, when you cover natural disasters like that, you see these awful situations that people are in. And you see people rise up that you're surprised by, people who, if you would ask them a week earlier, do you think you're going to rise up, come out of this travesty? And they would say, no, not me, I'm not that guy. And then all of a sudden, they're the ones who are actually leading the way. But it also makes you think about people who are special in your life. And that's why I texted you. It makes me think about people that I'm grateful for in my life. And you were somebody that came to my mind. And like you said, it didn't take long for me to send that message to you because it was very heartfelt. I sent it quickly. But oftentimes when I'm sitting around, I will just send notes to people to lift them up. And what I realize, and I think everybody in this room probably realizes this, but when you do that, it makes you feel much better as well.
So you just quoted Proverbs 11:25, and you didn't even know.
I didn't know.
He who refreshes others will themselves be refreshed. So in God's economy, if we want to get things better about ourselves, then we need to pay a lot of compliments to people around us for the great job they do. Such a good job of doing the interview, setting all this thing up. Miss Professional over here. And she's part of thank you for getting her ready for her advanced career.
Wasn't hard. She was a pro from the start.
Thank you. So I don't think I would hear the end of it if I don't ask this question. But my maternal grandmother lived to be 110 with aunts who lived to be 106 and 108. How much of that longevity ties into my gene pool versus my healthy lifestyle? Betty Jean Cleveland, my mother-in-law.
Oh, she's here? Here's the amazing thing, is that their genetics probably plays a much smaller role than people realize.
Really?
Yeah. This is some recent data that has come out. This guy named Eric Topol, if you're interested in this, another good book. He's just written a book called Super Agers. but they basically now we have the capacity using AI and other things to rapidly evaluate people's genetic profiles and find, are there commonalities in terms of genes? Are there longevity genes? And there are a couple here and there, but the vast majority of people who are centenarians, they did not necessarily have these longevity genes. So it's probably more a result of the shared lifestyle, having these models of people who are centenarians in your family's life, Tia, that allowed people to say, hey, they can do it, I can do it too, you know? You see what's possible. You do find these communities where if somebody has lived to 100, then all of a sudden a lot of people have lived to 100. It's almost like they've been shown what is possible. And a lot of times it's not as hard as they think.
Dan, somebody wants to know, what made you start Trilith?
Wow. My dad taught me a lot of lessons. He didn't teach me how to grow hair very well, but one of the lessons of life that he taught me is learn to take advantage of unexpected opportunities. I'm a planner. I like to plan things out. I like to plan a decade out, 10 years out into the future, and I found it very, very helpful to me to think in terms of a decade out. But on the other hand, there are a lot of things that just that you have to have enough white space on your calendar and in your checkbook. Don't run everything up to the margin, so that if an opportunity comes up, then you can take advantage of it. So we had a building here in Fayette County that was unoccupied. Somebody knocked on our door. They wanted to do a pilot called Drop Dead Diva. It was picked up by the Lifetime Channel. It ran for 8 seasons, I believe. In the meantime, my wife and I were in London for the Olympics in 2012. We knocked on the door and had a relationship with an executive at Pinewood Studios, the legendary studios that have been the home of 007 and Alfred Hitchcock, a lot of other remarkable storytellers going back to the 1930s. And so, you know, we built 5 stages, and we had 9 months to get 5 stages ready for Marvel's Ant-Man. And it was a sprint to the finish line. The paint was still wet when they moved in January of 2014. And huge demand for superhero stuff. Marvel had quite a slate of stuff they wanted to do, so we kept on building stages. And now we're up to 32 stages, so it's a big place. We now got to get it reoccupied because there's a lot of transition that's gone on in the feature film business.
Yes, but here we are, and we're claiming in the name of Jesus that the business will pick back up for all the studios. Sanjay, I'd like to know, for someone who is starting from a place of bad health, overweight, bad habits, etc., how can someone start to get healthy now when their job, their social circles serve unhealthy foods? It can feel impossible to change those dynamics. What would Sanjay advise to make incremental changes?
Well, I think the term incremental is probably the most important thing here, because I think a lot of people, they immediately want to swing for the fences as soon as they think about improving their health. They want to make these dramatic changes, and I think what the studies have shown is that if you try and do too much too quickly, it's probably not going to be sustainable. I think 2 things I would say. First of all, I think, and I'd be curious what Dr. Franklin says about this as well, but the 70% of chronic disease in this country, I think, is preventable. So, and we spend $4.5 trillion on healthcare in this country, so you can do the math. I mean, you're talking of trillions of dollars of preventable disease in this country. And the vast majority of that, I think, is in terms of how we nourish ourselves, what we're putting into our bodies. So simply improving your diet, and if you don't have good options at wherever you're working, then to be able to cook food at home, bring it in. It takes a little bit more work, but it is totally worth it. And as I said earlier, to just move. Just moving. It's almost like once you start to move, it's like a flywheel. Once you start to move, it sends all these other things into place, and I think it perpetuates good health for yourself. So walking instead of running initially, improving little things about your diet, watching your calories. I think if you look at the United States versus Europe, the quality of food is different in Europe, but also the portion sizes are very different in the United States. So just being really mindful of that. And as Dan and I were talking about earlier, having some objective measures, celebrating your successes, I think goes a long way as well. people wait till I'm not going to succeed until I hit this really audacious goal. Celebrate the small victories as well.
I got some friends that follow me on Strava, so they'll know when I get back tonight how many miles I put on my bike tonight.
Right.
Comment if you would.
Accountability.
Here's my question for you. There's a lot being said about ingredients that are going in food today.
Yeah.
So are you really concerned about that as the administration is?
Yeah, so, I have to say, so this whole movement to make America healthy again, I think there's probably a lot of notes that people widely agree on. It is very hard to do these studies. So take, for example, something like red dye number 3, which is something that is likely to be banned over the next couple of years now. It doesn't have any nutritional value. It is a petroleum-based dye that basically is used for aesthetic purposes to make your foods brighter. Fruit Loops are going to be more red because of red dye number 3. I think a lot of people will say, well, what's the data behind how harmful that might be? And I think the reality is collecting data like that is very, very hard to do, maybe impossible. So the principle that I think a lot of people in the Make America Healthy movement, and frankly places around the world, think about is something known as the precautionary principle. We're not sure that this is necessarily harmful, but we do know it doesn't have any nutritional benefit, and it could potentially be harmful. It may cause cancer in animals and things like that. We think that there's enough of a concern to start eliminating some of those things from our diet. I think that makes sense. If we constantly wait for a level of evidence that may be impossible to achieve, I don't think we're going to make any changes. So we know that food and bad food is linked to poor health. We don't always know what specific things about those foods are causing that bad health, but I think we can start to apply the precautionary principle more carefully.
Government mandated health code. I saw that recently in Singapore. We're about to open a Chick-fil-A restaurant there. And so there's green, yellow, red dots that we're going to have on our menu board. And I assure you that our Chick-fil-A cookies and cream milkshake will not be a green dot on the menu board.
Hey, you know what? You got to enjoy yourself every now and then as well. I didn't say that I was perfect, Dan. No, but seriously, I think you got to be careful with demonizing people and their food habits. I think you really have to be careful because I think it can cause backlash. And I think there is a component of joy that comes from how we nourish ourselves as well. And I think most people who just stop to think about it can find that balance. So I do like my peach milkshake. As soon as you start selling them, I'm going to go buy one for sure.
Dr. Franklin said you got to enjoy food. That's what he talked about the other day.
Okay.
Dan, I think you will appreciate this question. Somebody said, Mr. Cathy, your leadership at Chick-fil-A has often emphasized servant leadership, purpose, and values. In today's rapidly changing world, how do you believe business leaders can maintain strong ethical foundations while also driving innovation and responding to societal changes? Satina from QTS.
Yeah, wow. Well, QTS, just a shout out. We'll have a brand new, wonderful neighbor, Quality Total Systems, known as QTS, an incredible 6, 7, I think it's up to 900-acre campus now. And we got some of our friends down here that are nodding their heads. A round of applause for QTS, a wonderful new neighbor that is going to create employment. They may create a little traffic, but I think the employment, economic impact is going to be far, far better. These are going to be a whole nother generation of friends that are going to help us have a robust, relevant community that has the right mix of employment opportunities. And so we're so delighted to have them as our neighbor. They're a great neighbor. They're going to be planting thousands and thousands of trees. And I know that they eat up a lot of power, a remarkable amount of power. But if we sum it all up, they're going to be a fantastic neighbor for us. So that's my little shout out to QTS and being great neighbors for us. The idea of servant leadership combined with innovation, those are timeless principles. The idea that we're here to serve, great leaders, SCRVE, and we have a little acrostic that we teach about that. That'll be for another day. So we know we have to be in service to other people. We've got to be engaged. We have to have care. We've got to be concerned when people are emotionally distraught. We've got to they need to know that we feel that, we share that with them. So that general idea of service. At the same time, though, we have to be very relevant and we have to be innovative. We have to have fresh combinations. Things like AI is a dramatic disruptor. These bicycles that you see up here, this is a great example of a very disruptive example of how technology is making a dramatic change. I could get off on telling you about what I'm discovering about electric bicycles and how transformative it's going to be for us. So I think we as leaders, we have to absorb this dramatic transformation into our own lifestyle. We cannot ignore it. It's awful for us as leaders not to have ChatGPT and using it on a regular basis. I have to confess, I said, I'm gonna be with Sanjay Gupta about 6:30 this morning. I'm gonna be with Sanjay. Can you give me 4 or 5 interesting things about Sanjay Gupta that most people don't know?
Wait, did you do that?
Absolutely. It was. I'll show whatever I did with my phone. I have to find my phone. Oh, it's on my bicycle. I left it on my bicycle there. So I'll show you I'll show you the answer.
I'm really curious what it said.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, we all have to embrace technology. We have to be innovators, and we have to lean forward into the future. All of us do. You know, it's not just the CEOs. It's everybody's got to lean forward just a little bit in order for us to live the life that's exemplary so that we can serve people more effectively.
We have so many great questions, but unfortunately, we're not going to make it to all of them. So we're going to end with this question. How do you guys want to be remembered?
Exemplary father. I have 3 teenage girls. That's my life.
Well, anything I say is going to be less than that, I'll tell you that.
ChatGPT should have told you to go first.
Yeah. But I will affirm there's a great definition for children since you referenced this, and I think this is going to be a great way for us to kind of close this thing out. But years ago, we had a guy named Dennis Rainey who said this about children. He said, children are messengers we send to a time we will not see. And so the more exemplary our lifestyle, it's not just about our life, but it's about those that are watching. And if we can ever pay it forward in any way, it's going to be about the daily choices that we make, about our habits, just our daily choices that we make, so that it could be replicated. I know that I'm living an extended version of my dad's life. I was totally in line with his values. I was in line with his work ethic. I was in line with his love of people and serving people. And I'm living his life on into a whole nother generation. I would be so fortunate if that happens with my children and my grandchildren.
That's amazing.
Goosebumps. Yeah.
We want to let's give them a round of applause. Wasn't this just a flourishing conversation? I know. Don't want it to end.